Welcome back to the Fish Tank, presented by Van Horn Law Group and Casabella Design Group. Seth Levit, and the man with the best hands in the podcast business. I don't know if that was the intro I should have gone with today.
Yeah, Juice, I don't know, Big Seth. That's
that's an inside joke. That's an inside joke. So let's just leave it there.
A little bit of an inside joke. Well,
you're
you heard that
voice. You're not talking about these crooked fingers, are you?
Those are not the best hands in the podcast business, that's for sure. But those are the hands of the one and only Kim Bokamper, as in the Bo in Out to Pasture with Bo and Joe. He's also the color analyst for the Dolphins preseason television slate that we've been watching on CBS Miami. And Juice, he happens to also be one of the legendary Killer Bees from the Dolphins' iconic 1980s defense. Kim Bokamper, kind of a regular these days on the podcast.
Nice to be on the Fish Tank with you guys now. It's been a long time for me. You're kind of brushing the dust off me a little bit and getting me to work.
Yeah, Sam, you talk about all this other, whatever he has, names and all this. What a great fucking dude we got on here, bro.
Oh, man. Just the best.
You know what I mean? I mean, real talk, man. Like from day one, me down here, man, Bo's been great to me, man. And, you know, the 30 years I've been down here, Bo, and yes, I've been out here 30-something years now. Can you believe that? 32 years, Bo. Yeah. Man, you've always been amazing, bro. And it's awesome to always have you on, bro.
That. I got to give credit to, we've both been with this organization a long time. I got to give credit to the guys that I broke in with that taught me how to be a good football player, taught me how to be a good guy, and taught me to, be good to other people. So they came from a good lineage of an organization.
That's what's up.
That's great stuff. And listen, I'm no math expert, but I will say if I take 32 years off the top of both you guys, neither of you were out to pasture when you guys first met. So it's been a long journey.
No.
Not even
a long journey. So Bo, we I know on Out to Pasture, you guys have been doing your training camp updates, and Juice and I have been doing some of the same. And we just come off a week where, well, I know you're on this grand 11-day tour. We saw a glimpse of the view. That didn't look like the team hotel, Juice.
No, you know what? Goldie and I took a circuitous route to Detroit. I have a great friend, John Hargrove, and his wife, Mary Cheryl, and they invited us up to their house up in Upper Michigan, and it is spectacular. I could, my arm's not that good anymore, Juice. I knew you were a pitcher, but I could hoist a rock into Lake Michigan from where I'm sitting right now, and it's been a nice couple of days, kind of a nice little respite in the 2 days for 2 days off before we get back at it, and the joint practices that are coming up soon.
That's awesome, right there.
Well, speaking of joint practices, last week there was one joint practice with Chicago where, Juice and I weren't there, you were, Bo, but by all accounts, the Bears really set the tone. They came out there with a certain level of intensity, of physicality. There was questions as to whether or not they were following the agreement that had been set up between the two head coaches. But then when it came to game day, to the Dolphins' credit, I think we all felt they answered. They came back and they answered. But here we are now preparing for joint work with the Detroit Lions. And Detroit linebacker Grant Stuard said the following. So this was just posted today. I guess he was on a podcast. He said, "I don't know if they're ready. I'm going to keep it a stack. I played at other places and played against that team last year, and joint practices against them twice when I was in Tampa. I don't know if they practice how we practice."
Yeah.
Now, first of all, I had to go back and look. I don't know a lot about, I'm not taking a shot here. I just didn't know a lot about Grant Stuard. He's a former Mr. Irrelevant. So, he's a scrappy guy if he's still playing in the league as a Mr. Irrelevant, right?
So he should be quiet then, right, Big Seth?
I'm not saying he should be quiet. I'm just, well, we're going to see if that happens, right? But he was with Tampa. What's interesting is he was with Tampa in 21 and then in 22 and right before they traded him. And so he did a joint practice with the Brian Flores-led Dolphins, and then in 22 with the first iteration of the Mike McDaniel Dolphins. So I don't know which group he's talking about, but here's the question. I've really developed a bad habit, Juice, of these long questions. I'll just call that an exposition is what we'll call that. But has the perception kind of become a reality to some respect with how the league views the Miami Dolphins? And then what can they do to change that?
Yeah. Well, so here's my thought. You go back to last year. Let's go back a year ago, right around this time, and they signed Jordan Poyer. And Jordan Poyer, the first time he steps to the microphone in front of the media, says, "Hey, we knew how to beat the Dolphins. You get them on their heels, and basically they're going to lay down, and you run over them." And so this isn't the first time that people have spoken about that.
Yeah.
And I would think last year, some of the times the way they played, maybe it was true. But there's one thing I see this year. So in the joint practice against the Bears, Ben Johnson, he came from Detroit, and we know what Detroit is. We know Dan Campbell. We know what that team's about. That's a physical team, and he works their players hard, and they're going to be very physical. So Ben Johnson's bringing that. I think is bringing that to Chicago, and I think when in the first joint practice, the only joint practice, he wanted to flex that muscle. So instead of just bumping or thumping the guys that they call them these now, they were throwing guys to the ground. I think a Waddle guy knocked the wind out of him, may have bruised a rib on a kind of a cheap shot, and so they got a taste of that. But I also do know in talking to Mike McDaniel in a production meeting and just watching practice through the course of this year, I think he's heard a lot of this. Hey, the team is soft. You don't practice hard enough. You don't do this. You don't do that. And I, from what I've seen so far, both on practices and in talking to Mike McDaniel, pretty much at length in the production meeting we had, is I think he knows that. I think he's, because Mike is gonna try to turn over every stone during the offseason and figure out what didn't work last year and see if he can make it work this year. And so I think, and when I was talking, I said, Mike, I watch your practices now. They're crisper, they're up tempo. They seem to be a little bit more physical. And he said, and he kind of said, yeah, that's kind of what we're looking at. And if you notice, he's going around to he'll go to the defensive lineman. He'll go to the linebackers. He'll go to the offensive line. So he's this year he's going to all these units and just pushing them a little bit. And so I think he too realized that maybe they were not as physical as they need to be. And I think when you saw the game, I thought they tackled really well. I thought that front seven that we knew was going to be really good played really well. I think I maybe one missed tackle, and that's pretty unusual for the first preseason game.
That's a fair point.
And I think the offense on the offensive side, I think that line probably didn't have the ability to play as physical as they would like, only because you had Patrick Paul, did play last year, and then you got Jonah Savaianaya. And Jonah, this is his first day. He was a right tackle in Arizona. Now he's a left guard. He's playing guard. He needs to figure out that position. So it probably made him a little tentative, right? And then it's the first time that Aaron Brewer just started practicing. And so that offensive line, that's the first time they were all together, although they didn't have Austin Jackson. So I think that may have been a little bit of the problems for them. And especially when you looked at the goal line, if you noticed, whenever they got to the goal line, whenever they got inside the 5-yard line, they didn't throw any balls in the end zone. They were going to punch it in. And so I think Mike's trying to drive that message that, hey, we're going to be tough, we're going to be grinders, and we're going to punch it in. He talked about it after the game. And so, I can understand him saying that, but I think this is a completely different team, personnel-wise and attitude-wise, and everybody now wants to be a little more. Look, you automatically get more physical when you get Kenneth Grant, Jalen Phillips, Zeke Biggers, and then on the offensive line you get Savaianaya, and you get that and you got Patrick Paul from last year. That automatically makes you a more physical football team. Now they've got to be, it's going to take a while for them to gel, but when they gel, I think we're going to see a completely different team from a physicality standpoint.
Bo, what's crazy to me is that I didn't realize this, and I don't know who else. I mean, you guys probably already knew this, is that pretty much in the preseason, the teams get a chance to handpick really the teams they want to probably play in the preseason as well as who they want to obviously go and joint practice with. So I think it's ironic or maybe on purpose that we're going against the NFC North team like Chicago Bears, an NFC North team like the Detroit Lions, and of course Dan Campbell, test our physicality.
Yeah.
I think that was a great move by us. So, to see, we saw the fisticuffs last week, but I think they responded in the game. Now they're going, I think, to a tougher opponent in the same division. And I think that's a great move by Mike McDaniel to see, hey, who's about it? And when it comes to, hitting somebody in the mouth or taking a hit in the mouth and they're responding to it.
He said, he said it the first time he met the media for the joint practice with the Bears. He said as soon as I saw the schedule that we were going to play a preseason the Bears, the first thing I did was I got on the phone and set up a joint practice with the Bears, and then moved on because those coaches call around and see, and you're right, and then you go for two with the Lions, and so it doesn't get more physical than that.
Yeah, I'm glad you also brought up some of the young guys that they brought in. Those three defensive tackles all look like they're dudes, right?
They look very good. Very good.
All three of them, which, kudos to, if that is the case and that carries beyond just, a couple practices and preseason, to be able to get guys at all different spots throughout the draft, guys that could come in and play and contribute and who are physical and kind of check the boxes of those things you're trying to accomplish. Got to give the scouts and Chris Greer and everybody a lot of credit for that. At what point, though, does that translate to changing the perception? Because I am under the impression, and I'm with you, I think that people are going to get caught off guard. I think, and not just because of those three players. Certainly those three players. Don't try and tell me that Zach Sealer isn't physical or that Zach Sealer isn't a tough guy.
And look, you got Jordan Brooks.
Another one.
You got all these linebackers.
He died, and those guys, yes.
Terrell Dotson. They got it on the sideline because one didn't think that the other one was living up to his job. So they're fighting. So they're fighting for their guys to raise the level of their practices. And so as far as the physical thing and going into this Detroit game, I'm not sure who this guy is. I don't know him from the hole in the wall, but I do know OJ. And I know if OJ was on this Dolphin team and he's a defensive back and, first or second play you get, you're going to kind of look for his number and you're going to lower the boom on him and say, hey, take that for being not very physical.
Right.
Don't be
That's
talking
what I wanted
shit.
to ask both of you guys.
Don't be talking shit about us without expecting to get a little payback. So, you hope you go to, what do you call it? You hope you have enough chips to cover your ass,
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's bottom line right there. I love talking bottom line is that when they want to set that tempo, you bet your ass I'm going to be the guy that's going to be out there doing things that probably weren't supposed to happen because you told us one thing, now it's something else. Like I talk about it all the time. We were doing a joint practice with, I think, the Redskins.
Yeah.
And we're supposed to be kind of like a thud, and they want to do some extracurricular. And so, hell, it's time for us to do the same.
Yeah.
Sam Madison saw us getting blasted on the offensive field. So, hell, when their receivers were running, so were our DBs lighting their ass up too, man. I think I love that, man, because honestly, Bo, when you go against these other teams, that's when the teams, the Miami Dolphins, come together as a team. Because all those other weeks, it was offense versus defense, and we didn't like the defense. Defense didn't like us. And all of a sudden, we got to have each other's backs.
Yeah.
Now we got to have each other's backs.
You had first play. You just look him up. I don't care what you're blocking. I don't care what route you're supposed to run. I don't care what you're supposed to do. You're just going to forget it. I'm just going to make a beeline. I would probably get two of you guys. Go, hey, you come from this side. I'll come from this side, and we'll get this started in a good way right now.
Yes, sir.
So that was the question for me. Like, my version of a tough guy in training camp was Harvey made us wear long pants, right? Like, so that's when we knew we could stare down the other PR staff because we had to wear long pants and they were running around in shorts. But for you guys, if somebody questioned your character, your toughness, whatever, do you actually have is it an unspoken rule, or do you guys like discuss in the huddle or everything you were just talking about.
Yeah.
Are those conversations had?
Well, I think with this group, I think this group talks about that stuff. Maybe not last year, maybe not the year before, but I think this group, this is a whole different group. This is a whole different mentality. Right. I can see it. I can see it around the whole. These guys are tight, OJ. The groups are all going. They're all going with everyone. They're going to dinner by themselves at night, and they're they truly like each other, and they truly want to protect each other. And so I just think this is going to be and this is, last week was the first phase of let's toughen up a little bit. Let's start being some bullies ourselves. And I think this is the second phase of it. And then, you get Jacksonville, and then all of a sudden you kick it off with Indianapolis. And I think this team, the way it's going, look, they've had a lot of changing parts in here from last year. That whole offensive line is, other than Brewer, is new. The defensive line, those three guys in the middle are going to be, and they're going to have to find the secondary. So it's going to take them a while to gel. But the one thing I'm not concerned about with this team, as much as I might have been last year, is the toughness, because I've seen it with those guys. I've seen it in practice, saw it certainly in the joint practice, and then in the game. Like I said, one of the things you look at, especially on the defensive side, is the tackling, and the tackling in that game, which usually is pretty sloppy, was pretty good on Sunday or Saturday, whatever the hell day.
Whatever it was, you never know.
I've been out of town so long, I don't know what day it is.
You've been looking at that lake too long, is what it is.
Well, preseason's 5 days now, so you never know which day of the week it is anyways, Bo. Just say, the preseason. Right. And I love that we talk about the defense and the physicality and, some things that happened last week, because I think Anthony Weaver has been mixed and matched some guys pretty well. Some guys only had a few snaps, and I think that his scheme is going to lead to that. But I can only imagine that a defensive coordinator like Anthony Weaver, they had to be a little upset. I would say pissed off, but upset about, the verbiage and what they're thinking. And the famous words, Big Seth, of Jason Taylor, who actually, was on this podcast a couple times, they got to change this narrative.
There it is.
There's an opportunity to change this narrative right now. Yeah. Chicago thought they beat us up. Now we got somebody in Detroit talking trash. They got another opportunity to go there and impose their will. So I'm excited to see where they go from here. And I know that, they might not talk about it in the press or in social media, but I'm sure Anthony Weaver and that defense, we can't wait to get at some of these teams.
Usually, guys, I knew, because Monday is like an off, and then here comes Tuesday, and then now you move on. And the first thing you heard is this guy talking trash. And so, every one of those guys has heard it. Every one of those coaches have heard it. And they're, they got a little time to stew on it until they slap the pads on tomorrow. So this day is a day to stew a little bit, and it's gonna. I'm going to be excited to see what happens in the first or second snap of the first joint practice.
Yeah. Yeah. Bo, how many joint practices you guys have when you were playing? I know we had way more preseason games.
Yeah.
You had an extra one than me. How often do you guys get into joint practices?
Well, so we didn't. We had we played 6 preseason games.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think for most of my career, like the first 7 or 8 years, we would do a inter squad scrimmage when we got maybe the second week. In the third week, we would go up to Vero Beach, where the Saints used to train at Dodgertown in Vero Beach, and so we would go to Vero Beach, and we would scrimmage against them, and that was the only thing. Later in my career, the last 2 years, we would go up to Swanee and do joint practices with the Atlanta Falcons.
Okay.
Well, so it was late. The joint practice started late. We always did the scrimmage with the Saints in Vero, just a one day. But I got to tell you, so we go up to the first time we go up to scrimmage in Vero in Swanee with the Falcons. Dwight Stevens. So you remember they drafted
Tony Casillas.
Tony Casillas, he was the number 1 pick in the draft, All-American, so we're going up there in the newspaper. We get into Atlanta, and he's like talking to him. Well, Dwight Stevenson. Oh, and so Dwight kind of, Dwight didn't say anything. But I'll tell you what, you talk about wearing a guy out, man.
Yes.
He as soon as they got to one-on-one pass rushing drills, I'd say he got right on Tony and laid him on. I mean, Dwight had a way of snapping the ball, moving back a little bit, and pushing the guy to the ground. He beat that guy up so bad that he started crying and walked off the field. That's no lie.
Yes.
No lie.
Oh.
Hopefully we'll see a little something like that this week.
We asked Dwight about that, and what's Dwight's classic answer?
So nice.
Tony's a good guy. Tony's a good guy.
Yeah.
He's a good guy. If he starts saying a guy's a good guy, it means he kicked his ass. So that's usually what that means. Well, speaking of kicking ass, Bo, you are everywhere, man, between the television, now taking over the podcast world. And the great thing about our two shows is if you go on, you're on your podcast app and it says based on your listening, you might also like. Clearly, our listeners are getting recommended to each other because we target a certain demographic, when we start looking backwards. But excited to see the next.
I call it a nostalgic demographic.
There it is. I like that. You've thought that one through. That's pretty good stuff. Well, make sure you're subscribed to Out to Pasture or following Out to Pasture. Out to Pasture Pod is, I think, both on Instagram and Twitter. And Bo's big on social media, Juice. Bo's got all that figured out.
You got it, man.
Yeah.
Great stuff.
Never know how to get my finger off the camera, that's for sure.
He definitely has his finger on the pulse of what's happening there in social media. That's for sure. Well, he is Kim Bokamper. We can't wait to get your report after you watch this first practice and see if Mr. Irrelevant is still relevant.
It's still relevant, right?
If I can round up Joe, if not, I'm gonna have to use Goldie.
All right.
Well, yeah, are you guys heading out to dinner next? I mean, you guys are on this boys trip here.
We're heading out about 10 minutes from now. We'll be on the road to dinner.
Living the dream.
You're on Lake Michigan, man. Go catch some walleye, man, and put it on the grill.
I had some pike yesterday. First time I ever had pike.
Okay. All right. That'll work. How was it?
It was great.
All right. It's different than being down. I had mahi tacos today for lunch.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's what we do down here.
I get it.
They do pike up there. You know what I mean?
That's right.
All right, Bo. Thanks for diving in, Bo.
My pleasure.